Why any executive must consider labor management today. Well, here to speak with us about that is Charles Zosel, Vice President of TZA. Charlie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Russell.
Well, Charlie, there's no doubt about it. Many companies, many leaders of companies are moving toward labor management programs today. But let's define our terms first. What exactly do we mean by labor management?
Sure. So labor management is actually a pretty big thing. There's a lot of elements behind it, and a lot of people deploy it in different ways. But to try and simplify it down, there's really three major components. You've got engineering, you've got technology, and you've got people. You've got how they use the tool, how they use the tools that they're provided, and how they deploy that. Performance management, change management.
Well, let's blow up that definition a bit more then and talk about those individual components a bit more. Let's take engineering. Sure. What's involved there?
The two basic components of the engineering, it's wide-ranging again, but the first thing is to define how to do the work. What's the best way to perform it? So I'm 5 years old, and I'm getting a bowl of cereal and I need some milk. My old man is saying, all right, there's a better way to do it. So what's the best way? The best way is to take the bowl to the fridge and take the milk and dump it in and come back, right? So it's two steps versus, getting up, grabbing the milk, coming back, filling it. It's simple, right? But it's basic. There's a right way to do it. And so that's what's been ingrained, since I was really little. And so that engineering component is to find the best way to do the work. So it's looking at how you do the work. So with Pep Boys that we just presented with yesterday, to pick an order, it's 89 steps. And each of those steps takes time. And what does the customer care about? Well, the customer doesn't care about how far you walk to pick the order. They care about getting the product the right way. So, how can we take those 89 steps and make it, 82, 81, 79? And what about the other things that impact it as well? What are the other things? Let's get it out of the mix. So the first step in engineering is to define the best way to do the work, to have the workforce involved, have the supervision involved. Once you have the right way to do it, then you set the production rate to the work. So how long does it take to do each of those steps? So you have a very clean process that you then define how long it takes to do the work. And when we talk about doing the work, it's not a goal, it's not a target. We're setting minimum expectation. So common is 3 miles an hour. If most people have a treadmill, you get on that, you warm up, before a run, you walk at 4 miles an hour. A standard is set at 2.78 miles an hour. It's something that people can exceed every day, but because they're doing it for so many hours, they're very productive compared to historical norms. So you get the good process, and then you determine the rate, how long it takes to do each of those processes, and that's kind of the engineering component, right? That's the engineering piece behind it.
That kind of analysis, that kind of precision that you're bringing to figuring out the best way to do it, I'm assuming, is what you're going to do when you look at technology,
Sure.
When you're going to look at people. But let's take a look at technology for a moment now. Walk us through that.
Okay. So standards have been around since before the 1900s, but it really struggled to get into distribution. It really started to come into distribution around the 60s. So it's been in manufacturing forever, and that's a big reason why the U.S. is such a good producer of manufactured goods, because of those standards, and that's why we're actually really strong in manufacturing. It's been taking huge hits, but it's actually higher productive output per person, and that's tripled in the last 30 years. And standards are a big piece behind that. But so starting in the 60s, it started to come into the grocery industry, and basically anywhere where you have very tight margins, standards followed it. And what allowed it to come into distribution, so if you're manufacturing a good, if you're putting together a pen, it's very easy to count the number of pens and the movements to do it, so you can get a time to do it. In distribution, it's very difficult, because you've got long travel distances. You've got one of our customers has 500,000 parts that they ship. So how do you set a production rate to that? Well, that's where technology comes in. Technology allows us to connect with other systems that are out there and basically grab all the key volume indicators to determine how long it takes to do work. So in picking, very simple. You've got an order pickup point. We know where you're at. You sign into that piece of work. We know who you are, what time it is, what type of work you're picking up. And technology will track what you do. So we need to get that data into the system. So how much weight are you moving? How far are you traveling? What storage medium you're picking out. So if you go to a grocery store, how long does it take you to pick your groceries? Well, it depends. Well, what does it depend on? It depends on how far you have to travel in that grocery store, how many aisles you have to hit. Do you have to go to the deli counter? Well, a standard picks that up. So instead of talking about lines per hour, cases per hour, units per hour, you start talking about time. How long does it take to do certain elements? So the technology picks up that information that's out there. It's already being created by WMS, and it grabs it in so we can calculate a good dynamic standard on what it takes to do each piece of work. Some of the old timers call it throwaway standards, because the second that you do that work, you throw it away and you build a new standard for the next piece of work. That's what the technology does. So in the 60s, WMSs became more prevalent and that information became available. So all of a sudden you could bring standards into distribution and they're very needed, into those very, very tight markets. And it's pushing into all markets now. But it started in grocery and pulled through. Anywhere where there's tight margins, you'll see standards. And so technology allows you to capture that data. So now it can report on how well you did, for that day. And that's where standards started, is how well did you do today. But where it's at now is there's a lot of, instead of just being reactive, you're being proactive with the information that's available in the system. So if you've got your orders to pick today, you dump it into the labor management system, and it calculates how much time it takes to do all your work, and now you can labor plan to it. And it can alert you, hey, someone's performance is below a certain level. And there's all kinds of tools around it, incentive, discipline, all of that was within that technology of tracking how well you do as a performer.
Let's turn to what I guess some folks would say is the most important of the three components.
Absolutely. Yep.
I mean, it's the one that brings home a paycheck. The others don't seem to do that as far as I know. That's the people.
Sure.
So, A, let's talk about that component, and then B, let's talk about that component and how receptive it is to labor management programs in the workforce.
Sure. That's a good question. So now you've got a tool, and now you've got a tool that tells you how long it should take to do something. That doesn't give you any results at all, right? In sports, score more points, win the game, right? That doesn't mean that you know how to coach. And that's where we try and get the management teams and the workforce to, is how do we get the workforce to work in tandem with the management team to get results together? You never hear about a team winning and the coach losing, right? And vice versa. They have to win together. And for decades, there's been this huge rift between the management and the workforce, and we just got to blow through that. And so by bringing in these new tools, this engineering, this new way of looking at it, et cetera, gives you an opportunity to get that people aspect right. So how do we get them on the same team? How do we get them working together? And then how do we get them to get those results together and be successful? So it's accountability, it's incentives, it's coaching, it's how do I talk to people, how do I interact with them? When I'm coaching, how do I coach you? What are the things that you're doing right and what are the things you're doing wrong? How can you get better at doing what you're doing? How can I get better as a coach doing what I'm doing? So how do I get results? So we set big targets on where we need to go, and then we build the systems behind it on how you go after there and get it.
There is another very large component in many workplaces. That would be the unions.
Sure.
Question is, how receptive are unions to these types of programs?
Sure. So a lot of things have changed. I mean, these last 10 years it's been pretty dramatic for everybody. For the most part, the unions are getting on board on the concept that they have to be competitive as well. They've got to do it. If they're not going to do it, they're not going to be successful. That company, that site is not going to be successful. So we're really seeing the unions jumping on board. The Teamsters, just to name one because they're pretty big in distribution, they're on board. They get it. They know that the standards are the way. If, for example, in a grocery setting, that union site has to think of that non-union site as their competition. They've got to be more productive than their competitor. And if they're not there, those union jobs won't be there. We just had a site in Chicago, a large beverage distributor, union. Management said to them, look, if we can get our costs down, we're going to bring more volume through. If we bring more volume through, we're going to hire more of your members. If we don't get our costs down, we're done. We're shutting the site down. It's going away. And the union got on board with the management team, and they doubled their productivity. And now they've brought in more people into that facility. They do more throughput. And they went from the 44th site to the first site in the nation in productivity, in a mature industry. And they did that together. They did that working together. And the union benefits, there's security in being productive. There's no security in being unproductive. And so when the union comes on board, you get really good results.
You know, we talk about the unions, we talk about the employees, and I guess the assumption is we're talking about folks from mid-management level on down or something. What about the management team itself?
Sure.
Can there be an acceptance problem there
Right.
when you're bringing in or thinking about bringing in
Sure.
labor management programs?
I mean, it's a great question. So when you talk about change is great, right? Everyone wants to change, but it's actually really difficult to change. And yes, we change the process, how the worker does the work, and their lives change. Now they're accountable. Now there's visibility to everything that they do. But the manager level actually gets more change, because now I'm held accountable. My boss and my boss's boss see my productivity of my people. They can drill down into anything that my people do throughout the course of the day. So I'm under the microscope as well. And I've got targets that I have to hit as far as utilization and performance. It's a lot of change. It's a lot of new technology. It's a new way of talking to people. It's coaching. They have to go through a lot, right? And when we're framing it up and we're working with them, they need to know that it's gonna be uncomfortable. They are gonna struggle, but we're there to support them. The management team is there to support them. It's a new way that the company is moving. And they're going to go through it, and it's okay to have a hard time with it, but in the end, we're going to be there. We're going to get there together.
Final question, Charlie. Why will a company not survive if it doesn't have a labor management program?
Sure. All industries move to saturation. In a saturated market, if you want to get a loaf of bread, I mean, the choices that you have are phenomenal. You can get it from anywhere. And what are the differentiators? The quality of the bread, but then eventually it becomes the cost as well. And companies that don't operate with labor management, they're 20 to 30% lower than companies that do have it. And you'll see it in grocery. I mean, and I keep bringing it up because it's such a saturated market. You have to be extremely effective in your costs. And with Walmart coming in and into that market, et cetera, and it's going to be something else. In 10 years, it's going to be something else. And in every industry, it moves in that direction. It moves to saturation. And without it, you're at such a cost disadvantage that you'll struggle without labor management.
Efficiency and cost containment equals survival. Charles, I really appreciate you taking time to meet with us today. Valuable information.
Thank you.
Charles Zosel, TZA, speaking with us today about why any executive today must consider labor management. Thank you for watching.